Hi guys, thanks for sticking around to hear me talk. Before I start, I just want to say a really special thank you to a few people who are here today. When I was 15 and in Oklahoma, I'd never left the country before, and I got on a plane and I traveled 24 hours by myself, and I showed up in Brisbane, and I lived with a family. I moved in with this family, and they took me into their homes as like a bratty little kid, and they took care of me, and I lived with them for 3 months, and they're here today, and it's been they've been in my life for 11 years, and I'm really, really grateful that they're here. So Pat and Natalie and Janika, if you guys could stand up, I'm just really grateful that they're here, and I just want to shout them out. It's been an incredible journey. My relationship with Brisbane has lasted a long time. There are faces in this room that I've known for a really long time, and it's incredible to be finishing my time in Brisbane standing in front of you. I leave Australia tomorrow. I'm flying out, and so the end of my journey is happening right now. I'm feeling a lot of emotions. So as a result of all this emotional stuff, I wrote what I'm going to say. Normally I talk off the cuff, and that's what I'm good at. So we're going to see how this goes. But if I didn't, I'm kind of passionate about this topic, and I would go off in tangents, and we'd be here until 10 p.m. And I wouldn't be having a good time, but you guys would probably be sick of me. So I'm going to talk about intellectual property in China. And I spent my AFE working at the US consulate in Hong Kong, where incidentally there is a Peace Fellow alumni working as a US diplomat right now, which is super cool that I got to hang out with a Peace Fellow alumni the whole time I was there. But I did a lot of my work with US companies that want to invest in China, but don't because they're kind of nervous about their intellectual property being stolen. And I don't know if any of you have done work in China, but it's a pretty important topic. And it's in the news all the time. And I think it's really relevant to conflict and peace studies, right? Like we talk about wars and we talk about guns, but to me, conflict is often about economics. It's about how goods get from one part of the world to the other, how we allow trading to happen, and I think it's just as relevant as the guns when you're talking about conflict. So one of the most publicized conflicts in economics right now is that between the United States and China. And it's a really broad topic. You could talk about exchange rates, you could talk about human rights, but I'm just going to focus on intellectual property. That's what I wrote my thesis on. Specifically, I wrote about China's state capacity to protect intellectual property. China has the biggest intellectual property regime in the world. They have put more money into protecting intellectual property than any country. But their intellectual property regime is not working. And so that's what I wrote my thesis about. I'm going to make some generalizations. Please don't judge me. If I leave something out, it's not because I don't think it's important, it's because I only have a limited amount of time. So, let's see. China has grown really fast in the last 30 years. In 1979, China decided to open its economy, and since then, it's just been a phenomenal growth. And when you think about growth in China, you think like, well, it's been really successful. They had this centrally planned economy, almost no international trade, and now they're the second biggest economy in the world, which is a pretty big deal. However, China's growth has mainly been related to its low-cost exports. They have over 1 billion people, most of whom lived in poverty before 1979. But cheap labor was easy to come by, and now China is considered the world's factory. Right? But when you think of goods that are made in China, you think, oh, well, this transition's been really successful. Everything is made in China. Millions of people have been lifted out of poverty. China's economy is really strong now. However, this transition has mostly come from low-cost manufacturing, right? And I'm just going to ask, can any of you guys name like a successful Chinese brand? Okay. Any more?
Lenovo.
Lenovo? Very good. Any more? Okay, there aren't that many, right? But it's the second biggest economy in the world. Okay? Now, do any of you drive cars that are made by a Chinese company? Great Wall, but do any of you drive a Great Wall car? Would any of you, like, happily get into a plane that you knew was made in China? No. Okay, so China's got problems, right? It might be the second biggest economy in the world, but their economic model is on low-cost commodities, like toys, like textiles, not like high-tech commodities, like cars or superconductors. And the thing is, instead of investing in research and development on like these high-tech products, Chinese companies sell what's cheap and easy to make, generally. I mean, remember, I'm making gross generalizations here, okay? So don't judge me too harshly. And instead of looking for and investing in higher tech innovations, they just look for cheaper ways to produce the things that they already make. So because they're not diversifying their economy, they're competing against each other, and they're making razor-thin profits. And they're starting to crowd each other out of the market. So this market strategy, this economic model, isn't really sustainable anymore. And China understands this. And when things are, like when more high-tech equipment is produced in China, they keep the intellectual property separated. So let's say that there's a car that's produced in China. Well, one part of the intellectual property will be done in this factory, and another part will be done in a factory really far away. And the reason is because foreign and domestic companies are afraid that Chinese companies will steal their intellectual property and recreate their products and sell them for a cheaper rate. So people are really nervous about investing in China still. However, China knows that it needs to upgrade its economy. It wants to move to high-tech innovation. And at the same time, it's got problems. China's inflation is over 5% right now, which is huge. They have massive worker protests going on all the time. People are demanding better labor rights, more pay, greater political freedoms. So although China wants to move to this great high-tech economy, it's kind of difficult to do that because it has a lot of other problems. So China realizes that if it wants to become a truly economic global competitor, it has to switch this economy into more high-tech and advanced products, but it's not quite ready to do that yet. So one of the reasons that people don't invest in China is because they're afraid that their investments will be illegally appropriated, that their intellectual property will be stolen. And I don't know if you guys know exactly what intellectual property is. It's like the ideas that you create in your mind, you have control of, right? If you write a book, if you compose a musical, you have the right to profit off of that creation. Or you can license other people to have the right to do that. But if someone steals that idea from you, if someone makes a copy of a DVD or fakes your Gucci bag, it means that it's really hard for those people who invest in those initial creations to want to continue investing in them, right? So you lose your profits if your IP gets stolen. You lose the quality of your branding, because if people buy a Gucci bag, they expect this really high quality. But if it's a fake, it might fall apart in 2 days, which lowers the quality. And you don't want to invest in more research and development if your ideas are just going to be stolen by someone else. So at the same time, it creates health hazards, right? So the #1 pharmaceutical product that is faked in China is Viagra, yes. And if it's not made up to quality standards, you could have really disastrous side effects. You know, so what China needs to do is upgrade its intellectual property protection system. But it's difficult. It's taken a long time. Why is that? Well, China has a really long history of imitation. It was a principle of Confucianism that if someone made something that you really liked, you should copy it as a form of reverence. So it's like a form of respect to copy something. And then, under Mao in communism, the individual was kind of, sidestepped to the collective, right? So if someone created something, it was more about appropriating it for the shared community rather than giving that individual credit or profits from that creation. And so all of a sudden, in 1979, you've got this great economic awakening, and China realizes if it wants people to invest, And if it wants to become a global economic competitor, it's got to protect intellectual property. But it has no system to do that at all. It had no intellectual property regime until 1979. And so foreign companies came into China eagerly, really, really wanting to take advantage of the cheap labor, and they found that everything they brought into China was being stolen. And they were losing their profits, and everything was being faked.